Shalom everyone, hope everyone's doing well. Be'ezrat Hashem, we're continuing in Masechet Sanhedrin today with Yud Amud Bet 10b. We're going to start the fourth line on the page, ibbur chodesh b'shlosha. We're going to have two sections in today's learning. The first section will be 4 explanations what the Mishnah means when it says ibbur chodesh b'shlosha. The intercalating of the month requires 3. In the second section, we'll analyze the position of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in the Mishnah regarding ibbur shana, intercalating the year, and the symbolism of 3, 5, and 7 judges in that process. Be'ezrat Hashem, our learning should be as a source of refuah shleima, as a quick, speedy recovery for Yaakov ben Dinah, our good friend Jacob Shakib, and we should hear Sarot Tovot, good news soon. Now, before we begin, there's a couple of important points here to appreciate the Gemara we're going to do today. This is a fascinating discussion, really. We've been through a series of very interesting discussions because of all the different cases we've discussed in our Mishnah, and today is also a fascinating discussion that's found in other Masechtot, in Erachin, and Masechet Rosh Hashanah. Now, this first section is going to discuss the concept of ibbur chodesh. What is ibbur chodesh? So, today, we have a calendar. Right? This is something already that's been set up. Till Mashiach comes, we already have a calendar set up for many years. But back in the day, to determine how many days was in a month, it wasn't automatic, but rather, Beit Din would convene and decide with multiple steps, as we'll speak out, how many days would be in that month. Now, why is that important? Because we know that the lunar year, the year that is determined, which is the Jewish year, actually the Jewish year is a solar lunar year, it's a combination of the two factors. But we know the months in a Jewish year are determined by the moon. Now the full cycle of the moon should really be around 29 and a half, it's a little more than that, but 29 and a half days. You can't have a 29 and a half day month. The Gemara Masechet Megillah Daf Hey tells us we need full days. So either the month has to be 29 days or it has to be 30 days. So essentially, as we'll see, Beit Din was given the power, the authority, to determine, is the month going to be 29 days or is it going to be 30 days? And with the combination of 12 months, roughly the year was 354 days. I say roughly because it could be a little more, a little less, and if they added a month, which we're going to get to in the next section, it could actually be 13 months, and that's a different story altogether, which we're actually having this year. But what Beit Din would do is as follows, and this is what we're going to get into in the Gemara. First step, there was the chishuv, the cheshbonot. They would calculate. So the Beit Din would convene and say, based on many factors, which we're not going to get into, very interesting, Masechet Rosh Hashanah talks about this. They wanted fresh vegetables on Yom Tov. This was a very important thing, and if the month was set up in a certain way, that you'd have an issue with that, which we're not going to get into, or if there was a concern perhaps that dead bodies, someone who would pass away, would have to sit not getting buried for a series of days. This is one factor. There's astronomy factors too. But either way, they would sit down and calculate amongst themselves, should this month be 29 days or 30 days? Now, in addition to that, they would also have to do a process based on re'iyah, which is that witnesses who would see the new moon would travel to the Beit Din and would say, we saw the new moon. And these witnesses would be cross-analyzed, and if they checked out that it was true, so then Beit Din would sanctify based on their testimony as well. Now the reason that both are necessary, there's multiple reasons, but let's just take for granted both factors would be necessary to make the Rosh Chodesh determination. Now, you needed the calculation of the court, you needed the witnesses coming in and saying that they saw the new moon, and then they would do Kiddush HaChodesh, the sanctification of the new moon. Now let's just get the numbers clear. If Beit Din sanctifies the month, they say Rosh Chodesh is going to be the 30th day from the previous Rosh Chodesh. That means the previous month was 29 days. Meaning yesterday was the end of the last month. Today is Rosh Chodesh, it means the beginning of the next month. Previous month is 29 days, which is called chaser. It's a lacking month. Now, if they sanctified it on the 31st day from the previous month's Rosh Chodesh, that means the previous month was maleh, or me'ubar we could call it, full, which means it was 30 days. Beautiful. So Beit Din would make this determination, and they would then be mekadesh chodesh. Now, what our Mishnah said, which we're going to focus in on over here, is it said, at least according to Rabbi Meir, ibbur chodesh bishlosha, that the intercalation of the month, the determination if it's 29 days or 30 days, and Rosh Chodesh is on the 30th day or the 31st day, requires a court of 3 to declare. Now, the simple understanding of that means that you need 3 judges to sit down and say the previous month had been 30 days. That's what you need. So the question the Gemara is going to ask is as follows. The implication of our Mishnah is you only need 3 judges to sit down and declare that part of this process, that the previous month had been 30 days. But you don't need them to declare that the chishuv, the calculations done, don't require the 3 judges to convene in order to calculate that. And also the Mishnah seems to imply, but it's not true, the Mishnah seems to imply to be mekadesh chodesh, to sanctify the new month. You also don't need 3 judges. Now, sanctification would include accepting the witnesses and then determining this is the day that's going to be Rosh Chodesh. So the Gemara's question is going to be as follows. The assumption we're going in with is, if witnesses didn't show up, let's say witnesses did not show up on the 30th day, they showed up on the 31st day, or they didn't show up. What Beit Din is going to do on the 31st day is be mekadesh chodesh. Say today is Rosh Chodesh. So the question the Gemara is going to ask is, if there's going to be a declaration of Rosh Chodesh on day 31, sanctifying that 31st day, so by default, the ibbur chodesh, the understanding that the previous month had been maleh, had been 30 days, is assumed. Why do you need a convening of 3 judges to say the previous month had been me'ubar, had been full, if by definition when you sanctify the 31st day, that's the understanding, that's the implication? So why do you need that altogether? That's the question the Gemara is going to start off with here. So let's see this inside now. 4th line on the page, Yud Amud Bet. The Mishnah had said, ibbur chodesh bishlosha. The declaration that the previous month had been 30 days requires a court of 3. Asks the Gemara, chishuv lo katani. The Mishnah does not teach that they're convening to discuss how many days it should be. The calculations they would make required 3 judges. And the implication also is kiddush lo katani. It also didn't teach kiddush in our Mishnah, which means if they sanctify the 30th day, you wouldn't necessarily need 3 judges to sanctify. That's the implication. Ela ibbur. Rather, all it taught was to declare that yesterday, the 30th day, had been part of the previous month. That would require a declaration done by 3 judges. So the problem the Gemara asks is, but we would assume if Beit Din doesn't sanctify on day 30, they're going to sanctify on day 31. So lo liktisha, the Gemara says is, I don't understand. Let them not sanctify it on day 30, umemela le'aber. And then, by definition, tomorrow on day 31, when they sanctify that 31st day as Rosh Chodesh, you know the previous month was 30 days. So why do we need this declaration the previous month had been 30 days if you're not sanctifying on day 30? So then you're sanctifying on day 31, and by definition, the previous month is 30 days. So what's the necessity for this convening to declare yesterday was a 30-day month, the previous month was 30 days? By definition, when they sanctify it on day 31, because they hadn't sanctified on day 30, the previous month is understood to have been 30 days. So Abaye is the first explanation of our Mishnah. We'll have 4. Abaye says, Tani, Kiddush HaChodesh. Abaye says, instead of teaching in our Mishnah, ibbur HaChodesh, you don't need judges to declare the previous month had been 30 days. That's not necessary, because that's assumed automatically based on when they sanctify. Rather, the way you should understand our Mishnah is it's saying, Kiddush HaChodesh requires 3. The sanctification, and as Rashi explains over here, whether they're sanctifying on day 30, making the previous month chaser 29 days, or sanctifying on day 31, making the previous month 30 days, whether it's maleh or chaser, they're going to sanctify and declare that it's sanctified that day of Rosh Chodesh. And that requires 3 judges in order to analyze the witnesses and sanctify. But to declare the previous month being 30 days, you don't need. That's not the pshat in the Mishnah, because that's obvious. Tani Nami Hachi, and the Gemara says there's a braita that supports Abaye's understanding. Because the Mishnah says, Kiddush HaChodesh v'ibbur shana. It says sanctifying the month, whether it's day 30 or 31, but then it switches ibbur shana, it changes the language, and adding an extra month onto the year, which we'll discuss more later. Bishlosha, that requires 3 judges. Divrei Rabbi Meir, these are the words of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir was the Tana in our Mishnah. So the Braita actually changes the word from ibbur to kiddush to imply, like Abaye is learning in the Mishnah, it doesn't mean ibbur in the Mishnah, it means kiddush. When you sanctify the new day, the new month, the Rosh Chodesh, that requires 3 judges. And the way Abaye is learning is whether you're sanctifying it on day 30 or 31, but to ibbur, that's just assumed by definition based on when you sanctified. So therefore we understand the Mishnah according to Abaye is you don't need 3 to declare the last month had been 30 days. You do need 3 to gather together to say today is Rosh Chodesh, whether that's on day 30 or on day 31. Now Rava does not appreciate Abaye's pshat because he says if the Tana of our Mishnah meant to say kiddush, it would have said kiddush. Now, you have a Braita that says, Rabbi Meir says kiddush and not ibbur. Okay, a Braita is negated in face of a Mishnah. So Rava therefore wants to learn. Let's learn the Mishnah at face value as holding something about ibbur. But how do we understand it then? So Amar Rava says like this, Vaha ibbur katani, but our Mishnah says ibbur. How are you learning that the pshat in the Mishnah is when they're mekadesh, when they sanctify Rosh Chodesh, you need 3 judges, but not when they declare the last month? That doesn't really make sense because the Mishnah says ibbur and not kiddush. So Rava says a second pshat. Rava says really it's talking about kiddush, but it's a specific kiddush. Again, we have 2 days that you could declare Rosh Chodesh, either the 30th day or the 31st day, making the previous month 29 days or 30 days. So Rava says like this, Kiddush beyom ibbur bishlosha. The way you have to add in a bit of words. You can add in some words. To change the words is difficult, but to add in some words, says Rava, that's acceptable. What the Mishnah means to say is like this, if you're sanctifying on the 30th day, Yom Ibbur is the 30th day, that's the extra day that would make it from 29 to 30. So if you sanctify Rosh Chodesh, if the Beit Din sanctifies it on the Yom Ibbur, on the 30th day, making the previous month chaser 29 days, Bishlosha, that would require 3 judges. That's what it means. Meaning when the court, if they would want to declare Rosh Chodesh on the 30th day, making this Rosh Chodesh in the previous month 29 days, that would require 3 judges. And that's what it means. Ibbur, it said Ibbur in the Mishnah, but it means Kiddush on the Yom Ibbur, on the 30th day. The Ibbur itself, you don't need it. That's by definition implied, as we'll see. But the Kiddush, if you're sanctifying it on the 30th day, that requires 3 judges. Achar Ibbur, but Rava holds, if it was to be declared after the 30th day, means you're sanctifying Rosh Chodesh on the 31st day, making the previous month maleh, leka kiddush, then they don't have to declare kiddush. By definition, it's sanctified. They don't have to convene and make a beit din to sanctify because automatically it's sanctified. And this actually introduces us now to a machloket that's brought in Masechet Rosh Hashanah. Umani, who is this author? Rabbi Elazar ben Tzadok. It's Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok. What does Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Tzadok hold? The Tanya Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Tzadok Omer. Im lo nira bismano. If they did not see the new moon in its time, and its time is on the 30th day, so then they would not sanctify it the next day, because by definition it's sanctified. Ein mekadshin oto, they do not have to sanctify the month on the 31st day, shekvar kitshuhu b'shamayim, because in heaven it was already sanctified. So Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Tzadok holds that the Beit Din only had to do this process of Kiddush HaChodesh, declaring that today is Rosh Chodesh in a declarative sort of way on the 30th day. If that's when the moon was sighted and they declared on the 30th day, then you would do this process, new Kiddush, Kodesh, like the process brought in Masechet Rosh Hashanah of sanctifying the new moon. But, Mekudesh, excuse me. But if not, meaning if it wasn't seen on the 30th day, and then it's going to have to be a full month followed by Rosh Chodesh, 30 days followed by the next day being Rosh Chodesh, Beit Din didn't even have to convene to sanctify. It's already sanctified by heaven. By definition, it's sanctified. They wouldn't have to convene. So it says, Rabbi, that's the pshat in the Mishnah. Mishnah is saying that if you're sanctifying it on the Yom Ibbur, that's the emphasis, on the 30th day, then the courts would convene and say Mekudash, and sanctify it. But if it wasn't sanctified on the 30th day because the moon was not yet sighted, so then it would automatically be sanctified. The court wouldn't have to go through the procedure of Kiddush HaChodesh. That's the pshat in the Mishnah. It follows the position of Elazar Rabbi Tzadok. So Rav is arguing on Abaye, actually. Abaye again holds whether it's the 30th day or the 31st day, you would have to sanctify, and he learns that's a pshat in the Mishnah, which is, even though it says ibbur, it really means Kiddush. Rava says no, what it means is Kiddush on Yom Ibbur would require sanctification, on the 31st day would not require sanctification. Now we have a third pshat. Rav Nachman says the opposite of Rava. Rav Nachman Amar make Kiddush achar Ibbur bishlosha. The way you read pshat in the Mishnah is like this. When it says Ibbur in the Mishnah, it means if you sanctify after the Yom Ibbur, after the 30th day, you require 3 to declare Kiddush HaChodesh. But Yom Ibbur leka Kiddush. If it's on the 30th day itself that's making it into Rosh Chodesh, it doesn't require a declaration of sanctification by the court. So the pshat in the Mishnah is after the Ibbur, means on the 31st day, would require a court of 3 to declare it sanctified. On the 30th day itself would not. Umani, and who is the author, the Tana, that supports this? Plimo, it's the position of Plimo. The Tanya, as Plimo says, Plimo Omer, Bismano in Mikachinoto. If it's the 30th day, so then the courts would not have to sanctify it. Shalo Bismano, if it's not the 30th day, Mikachinoto, then they would sanctify it. Rashi quotes over here from Masechet Rosh Hashanah. What's the logic in this? Because everybody would understand naturally, if it's the 30th day, that's the normal day for Rosh Chodesh, everybody would take it seriously. But maybe if it's on the 31st day, which is not the regular, people might say, it's not really Rosh Chodesh. So to make a chizuk, to strengthen it, they said if it's the 31st day, Beit Din should make a declaration so everyone understands this is Taka, this is actually Rosh Chodesh, this is not some sort of a aberration, but this is really Rosh Chodesh. That is the third answer in accordance with Plimo to explain our Mishnah. And Rav Ashi says the fourth explanation. And he says, Le'olam bismanot le'olam chishuv katani. So Rav Ashi holds like this. Whether the moon is sighted on the 30th day or the 31st day, if the Beit Din was declaring it Rosh Chodesh, they did not have to declare it on the 30th day or the 31st day. We'll see a drasha supports this. It was automatically sanctified. By definition, you didn't actually have to declare it altogether. So what does the Mishnah mean when it says you need a court of 3 to declare? What is it referring to? It's not referring to Kiddush, and it's not referring to Ibbur either. Rav Ashi Amar le'olam chishuv katani. Our Mishnah Ibbur means when they would gather to discuss the factors that would go into making a 29 or 30 day month, that would require 3 judges. Uma Ibbur, how does it fit into the word Ibbur? So the Gemara answers, Chishuv the Ibbur. Says Rav Ashi, it means the calculation of Ibbur, that requires 3 judges, according to Rav Meir in our Mishnah. But the Ibbur itself, to say the last month happened 30 days, does not require 3 judges. Since in the next case we wrote the ibbur of the shana, the extra month, adding an extra month into the year, we used the word ibbur, so tzananami ibbur chodesh. We also used in the previous case ibbur chodesh, but really what it means to say is the calculation of ibbur chodesh. That's what it means to just use the same terminology to keep it consistent. So the Gemara says ibbur chodesh in, what comes out is, according to Rav Ashi, it requires a calculation for Chishuv Chodesh in, the calculation of the month would require 3 judges to get together and discuss it, but Kiddush Chodesh lo. As I said, according to Rav Ashi, the sanctification itself, declaring Rosh Chodesh, does not need to be done by 3 judges. You don't need that declaration at all. So Mani, who does Rav Ashi follow? Say the Mishnah would follow Rav Eliezer, it's the position of Rav Eliezer. The Tana Rav Eliezer Omer, Bein Bismano, Bein Shlo Bismano, whether it's Rosh Chodesh on the 30th day or the 31st day, Ein Mekachinoto, they would not have to sanctify. You don't need a declaration of the court to sanctify it, it's automatic. How do we know this? Because it says, in Parashat Bahar, I believe, Shanamar, it says, regarding the mitzvah of Yovel, it says, when it comes to the 50th year, we know that the courts would declare the 50th year of the cycle to be Yovel, and there were certain halachot that were significant on Yovel. You can't work the ground, fields would return to their original owners, etc. But the verse specifically says, V'kidashtem et shnat ha-chamishim shana. You shall declare the 50th year sanctified. And the extra word shana teaches us what's the emphasis, the 50th year. What is this extra emphasis, the 50th year you shall sanctify? Shanim ata mekadesh, it means, it's brought in Rosh Hashanah as well, that you have to sanctify the 50th year, but that's an exclusion to say, v'iyata mekadesh chodashim, you do not need to sanctify months, which means every month when you have Rosh Chodesh, according to this fourth answer, which is the position of Rabbi Eliezer, you don't have to sanctify it in court. It's automatically sanctified. There's no necessity to sanctify Rosh Chodesh. So therefore, when the Mishnah says you have to gather as 3 and make some sort of a determination with 3, it's referring to the calculation of ibbur chodesh, but the sanctification itself does not require 3 judges. We have 4 ways to understand ibbur chodesh. Now it's all within the position of Reb Meir. Again, either it means the sanctification of whether it's 30th or 31st. That was Abaye. Or we had Rava who said it means if it's sanctified on the 30th day, it requires 3. The next day would not require 3. So it means the kiddush of the day of the ibbur would require 3, not after that. And we had the third opinion, which was Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said, Rav Nachman said the opposite of Rava, which was if you're sanctifying it the day after the ibbur, means the 31st day requires 3, not the 30th day. And the last opinion is Rav Ashi. He says it means chishub, the calculation of the ibbur requires 3, but the sanctification itself does not require 3 judges, as it's automatically sanctified. Moving on to the second section now. We taught in the Mishnah that Rav Shimon Gamliel argues and says when it comes to ibbur shana, which is intercalating the year, you need to start off with 3, discuss it with 5, and then conclude it with 7. So it means Rav Meir said ibbur chodesh or ibbur shana requires 3. Intercalating the month or the year requires 3 judges. And Rav Shimon Gamliel says ibbur shana, adding an extra adar, like we have this year actually, requires 3 to start off, 5 to discuss, and 7 to conclude. So now we're going to discuss this position of Rav Shimon Gamliel. The Braita will explain to us what he means exactly. Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer, Bishlosha matchilin, he said you start off with 3, you discuss it with 5, and then finish with 7. Tanya. So the Braita explains like this. Ketzad. How is the process of adding an extra month onto the year done? Now, there were many reasons why the Beit Din would add on an extra month. So this Braita will follow the position of Shimon Gamliel. Amar Rav Shimon Gamliel. Bishlosha matchilin. They would start with 3. Uva chamisha nos'in v'notnin. They would discuss it with 5 judges. V'gomrin b'shiva. And then they would finish off declaring that this year is going to have an Adar Bet, a second Adar, with 7 judges. So the Gemara explains, what does that mean? Echad Omer said that the Braita says, if one person would say leshev, that we should convene a court. I mean, if one judge would say we should convene a court to potentially make an extra Adar. V'shnayim omrim shelo leshev, and 2 others say it's not necessary. We don't need to make an extra Adar. So batel yachid b'miuto. So what would happen now is that would be the conclusion of it. The one would be nullified against the 2, and therefore it wouldn't be an extra Adar that year. However, Shnayim Omrim Leshev, if 2 judges said we should convene a discussion in order to determine if we need an Adar Bet. Ve'echad Omer Shelo Leshev, and only 1 stands out of the 3 and says we shouldn't, it's not necessary. So then this was considered Matchilim B'Shelosha. Mosifin Aleyan Od Shnayim, we'd add on another 2 to the existing 3, V'nos'in v'notnim b'davar, and they would discuss the matter. It means they would discuss, should we add an extra month, an extra Adar onto this year? So then after these 5 are discussing, Shnayim Omrim Tzricha, if 2 of them say we should add an extra month, Vishlosha Omrim Einat Tzricha, and 3 say we don't have to add an extra month. So again, Batlu Shnayim Miutan, that would be the end of it. The 2 would be negated to the 3, and therefore there wouldn't be an extra month added onto that year, and that's the conclusion of the discussion. But Shlosha Omrim Tzricha, if 3 say that we should add an extra Adar Bet, Vishnayim Omrim Einat Tzricha, and 2 only say we should not, and so then we can continue on. We add on to the existing 5, Od Shnayim, another 2 judges, which is now a total of 7. And then the existing group would declare, if the majority say that they should add an extra month, that there is going to be Adar Bet this year, an extra Adar. And why is it? Why does that need to be 7 in conclusion? She'ena minyan pachot mishiva, because in order to determine this extra Adar, intercalating the year, adding the extra month to the year, there has to be a total of 7 in conclusion in order to effectively make that Adar Bet. That's the point. Now the Gemara goes on to tell us what is the symbolism of these numbers. It means the Gemara understands it must be that these are not arbitrary numbers, but there's some significance of these numbers. So the Gemara says, Hani shlosha v'chamisha v'shiva keneged mi. What do these numbers 3, 5, and 7 correspond to? Again, according to Rav Shimon Gamliel, you start off with 3. If this goes to the next stage, you'll add another 2. And if it goes to the conclusive stage, you'll add 7. But add another 2, which is 7. What is the significance of 3, 5, and 7? And the Gemara says, Pligi ba Rabbi Tzadok bar Nachmani v'chadi imei. So Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani and another person argued about this. Umano, who was the other person? Rav Shimon ben Pazi. It was Rav Shimon ben Pazi. V'amil, another say Rav Shimon ben Pazi v'chadi imei. Another say Rav Shimon ben Pazi and another person argued about this. Umano Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani, and that was Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani. So there's a machloket about this. What is the symbolism or significance of 3 judges, 5 judges, and 7 judges? So Chad Amar once said, Keneged Birkat Kohanim, that these numbers correspond to Birkat Kohanim. This is a very interesting symbolism. In Birkat Kohanim, we have 3 sections, right? Yivarech Hashem v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Hashem panav elecha v'chuneka, Yisa Hashem panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. So we have the first, second, and third section. The first section has 3 words, the second section has 5 words, and the third section has 7 words. The point is that we find this idea that it's 3, 5, 7, so there is such a symbolism. Now, what is the connection between Birkat Kohanim and sanctifying the new month? Something to think about. But the first of the opinions says the 3, 5, and 7 judges required for sanctifying the extra month in the year, for dedicating the ibbur shana, to add the extra adar, that is based on the precedent of Birkat Kohanim. Chadam, the other one says, this is very interesting, this ties into Masechet Megillah, coming up to Purim now. The other Shita says, Shlosha, when it says 3, Keneged Shomrei Asaf. Now we'll learn like Rashi here. It corresponds to the gatekeepers of the king. Or, as Rashi says, there's 3 gatekeepers that are found when it comes to kings, as listed in Tzidkiyahu, regarding Tzidkiyahu. It's a Jewish king, actually. Chamisha, 5 of them, Meroi Pnei HaMelech. 5 were the officers that were intimately connected to the king, who could go into the king regularly whenever they wanted, which is a reference to Achashverosh, actually. Rashi learns. 1 second. Oh, sorry. That's back by Nevuah Zaradan. Sorry, Melachim Bet. So there's 5 which referred to the intimately connected officers who used to be able to go into the king whenever they wanted. And Shiv'ah, the 7, were Roi Pnei HaMelech, were the general officers who could sometimes go into the king. Rashi says that actually is referenced in Megillat Esther by Achashverosh. Now we know that there were these 7 officers that were not intimately connected, that they can go into the king whenever they wanted, but they were able to go in sometimes, infrequently. So the symbolism is based on the officers of kings. 3, 5, and 7. 3 gatekeepers, 5 officers who could go into the king whenever they wanted. Roi Pnei HaMelech, they could see the face of the king. And the 7 is the general officers who sometimes could go in to see the king when infrequently. That's how Rashi learns. Now, Rashi explains what is the connection between these officers and adding an extra month onto the year. So he says the earthly domain is reflective, or the Malchut in this earth is reflective of Malchut Shamayim, and these officers, they served the king on this earth, which is the Jewish king, the non-Jewish kings, and based on that, Rashi says since we know that the idea of adding an extra month is to benefit, Rashi learns, very interesting, is Tachsisei Shamayim. It's the strategies of Malchut Shamayim, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because adding an extra month will keep seasons in line, meaning is that Pesach won't eventually end up falling out of season, not in chodesh Aviv. That's why they would add an extra month to keep the lunar and solar years in together, as they should be. So therefore, there's a good reference in how they used to run the kingdoms below with their officers, in reflection of the adding the extra month, which is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu ultimately wants in terms of keeping the seasons and the Yamim Tovim in line. That's how Rashi explains over here. Tanya Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef continues and says there's actually a braita that supports the second opinion. Hani shlosha v'chamisha v'shiv'a. What is the 3, 5, and 7 of the judges required to add an extra month onto the year? Shlosha keneged shomrei asaf. So 3 corresponds to the gatekeepers of the king. Chamisha miroi pnei HaMelech. 5 correspond to the officers who could go into the king when they wanted. Shiv'a, and the 7 is roi pnei HaMelech. They were the ones who would go in infrequently, less frequently, but also were officers of the king. Amarli Abai Rav Yosef. Abai turned to Rav Yosef and he said, "What a beautiful pshat, Rav Yosef, you're bringing from this braita. But Ada idna my time alone parish mar hachi. Why didn't you explain this to us before? You should have told us this symbolism of the officers corresponding to the numbers, as we find by adding an extra month to the year." So Amarli Rav Yosef back to Abaye. Amar lahu, he said back to them, "Lo hava yadana titzrichitu. I didn't know that you needed it. I didn't know that you wanted to know this." Did you ask me something and I didn't tell you? Because if you would have asked me, I'd be happy to explain this pshat to you. I didn't know you were lacking this pshat, and that's why I hadn't explained it to you. We're going to stop here. Bottom of Yud Amud Bet. Bezrat Hashem, we'll pick up tomorrow. The 2 dots, the bottom of Yud Amud Bet with Yud Aleph, Amud Aleph. And in the meantime, everybody have a wonderful day.